going to dive into Lightroom Classic this week, and we're going to edit a photo of a bird. It's going to be a photo of a robin. I actually love photographing robins. There's a specific spot I go to where they seem to hang out, and I absolutely love just their little personalities. Really fun bird to go and photograph. And actually, this time of year where there's a lot of sun, and it's very bright in the day, it's a great way to go and still be able to take photos, even though it's super bright because it's a nice shaded, kind of forested area. But anyway, no need to go on about it. Let's dive into it. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each week and every Tuesday we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. Quick question. How are we feeling about the fresh intro? Two options. Number one, I hate it. I need you to stop because I can't get it out of my head. I can't stand it anymore. Option two, never stop. I love it. None of this will be the same. I live for it all week. Now, look, I'm not going to lie to you. Those are two pretty polarized ends of the available answers, but I really think they do sum up the only two possible ways you might feel about it. So let me know in the comments, how are you feeling about it? Let's dive into this photo. Now, as you can see, there's quite a lot that we're going to want to do with this photo, right? Because there's a lot of issues with the exposure, maybe a bit with the color. We might even want to crop a little bit. So let's just start getting into it. We're going to use a lot of global editing. So obviously using the sliders to affect the entire photo, but we're obviously going to use a lot of masks as well. If you watch any of our other Lightroom videos, you'll know that's what we always do. We always go in heavy with the masks. I think it gives you the best end result. It allows you to really fine tune the image. Let's jump in. So the first thing we're going to do immediately is brighten the exposure. It's obviously a bit dark. I just had the wrong settings, and for speed, I just took the photo. So that's the first thing that we're going to do, is brighten it like so. The next thing I'm going to do is probably crop this a little bit. I don't think it needs to be as wide as it is. So let's do something like that. Let's go for something like that. I think that's probably going to look pretty good. I like that, quite like that. The next immediate thing to me is we want to bring those highlights down a little bit. It's very bright in the background. Let's bring the shadows up a bit as well. Maybe add a touch of contrast, a little bit of clarity, a little bit of texture. And then the most glaring issue I think that needs to be dealt with immediately now is the white balance. Let's cool it down quite a bit. And let's bring the tint over towards the magenta. There's a lot of green in the image. And if we do something like this, I think that's looking a lot better. We've actually already done quite a lot. So let's go ahead and look at a before and after. We can do that by pressing the backslash key on the keyboard. This is where we started, and this is where we've got to. So immediately quite a big difference in terms of the exposure. It's like we're turning on the lights, and that white balance as well, which I think really did need to be adjusted. Now, the next thing we're going to do is probably dive into the masking menu here, where there's a lot that we can do. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and click subject. Lightroom's going to pick our subject here, and it has done a pretty good job. It's got a bit of this branch, but that's okay. We're going to brighten this a little bit. We don't want to go too crazy with this mask because it can be a little bit too, shall we say, heavy-handed, not subtle enough, right? You can start, if I bring this up, it can start to look a bit silly compared to the rest of the photo. So we're going to keep it reasonably subtle, something like that. We are going to go ahead and do a radial gradient now, something like this. And we're just going to brighten that as well. It's going to help brighten the subject and the areas around it with a nice feathered radial gradient. And then another one, an even bigger one, something like this. We're going to invert that, and we're actually going to darken some of the areas around our subject. So it's almost a bit of a vignette there. Okay, that looks pretty good, actually. Let's bring a linear gradient in from the bottom right. We're going to do something like this, and we're going to darken that. We don't need that area to be particularly bright, and we want to push our viewer's eye up to our subject here. And then actually what we might do is another radial gradient, something like this up in the top, because that seems to be where the light is. Let's just brighten that so we're almost simulating that light up there a little bit more. Let's do the same thing, but with a linear gradient. We're going to bring that down very feathered like that. I'm going to move it up, bring the exposure up a touch, and bring the dehaze down a little bit. Now that's getting very bright. So we're going to come back to the overall global editing. I'm going to bring the exposure, the overall exposure, right down, something like that. And now we're going to go ahead and do another radial gradient, reasonably big. And we're going to bring that exposure back up so that our subject is one of the brighter areas of the image. Now let's add some depth to this with a brush. I've got auto mask here ticked on. That's going to help me essentially color inside the lines. So let's just go ahead and paint the underside of this branch. So with auto mask ticked on, it should do a pretty good job of helping me stick to the branch. It is doing a good job of that. I can then just darken this a little bit. It just adds a little bit of depth to the image, which I quite like. If I do a bit of this, I can just feather this a bit more onto the branch. Great. Okay, do you know what? That's looking pretty good. Let's look at a before and after again. So this is where we started. Very underexposed, not looking ideal. This is where we've got to looking, I would say, much, much better. Now, it is a bit bright in the top here. You know, if we were to turn off some of these masks, we could do that. But I do quite like it. It feels like we've got this kind of ray of light coming down onto the robin, onto our subject there, which I think looks pretty good. And it looks a bit more natural this way. If I was to turn off some of these masks, it can look a little bit less natural. We want to make sure we've got a nice bright subject. I might even come back down to the subject mask and just boost that a tiny bit. Let's actually not go too crazy. That immediately turned me off doing that. So we won't go too mad. Some of this is trial and error, right? And a good tip as well, actually, if you've got a bit more time, is to, if you're going quite heavy with the edit, do a lot of it, step away 15 minutes, make a cup of coffee or something, hang out in the kitchen for a minute, come back, fresh eyes, and you'll see, okay, maybe I need to tone this down, or maybe I need to go a bit further, something like that. Okay, great. I like where we are with this now. So we've done quite a lot of masking there. Let's come down and address some of the color issues I think we've got here. So for example, we're going to come to the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders here. We're going to start with hue. The orange I'm going to bring down a little bit. We don't want to go too heavy with this because it's going to really affect, is that the crest of the robin? I mean, I appreciate that it's the chest, I guess, but is it the crest? I don't know my bird terms. So if you know, let me know in the comments, because actually that would be quite interesting. So hue, I'm going to bring the orange down, but not too much. We just want to richen it up a little bit. The yellow I'm going to bring down as well towards the orange, just a bit there. And green towards the yellow, just a bit, just to unify those colors in the background. We don't want to go too heavy again with that. And I can probably leave the rest. Saturation, I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to bring the magenta down. I don't think there's a lot going on there, but I just want to get rid of anything that might be there. I'm also going to bring the purple down because I think it's affecting these kind of light orbs here in the background, which we don't necessarily want. We might even bring the blue down. That would really kind of get rid of those in the background. Maybe we'll bring the blue down just a little bit, something more like that. Now the green I'm going to bring down a little bit, and the yellow, just because I really want to focus in on our robin friend here. Right, we don't want to go too mad with kind of the color in the background because we want the focus to be the robin. If we were to bring the red down, is it doing much? Not really. It's affecting a little bit the background there. But you know what? We're going to leave that alone. We can double click to reset. Now, something else that I could do, which I think is quite an interesting little tool to make the most of, is come down here to the color grading. We're not going to use this for coloring, but the midtone section here, where we can add color to the midtones, right? So if I was to add orange, for example, to the midtones, maybe a bit of blue to the shadow, we get a little bit of a kind of an interesting color grade. Let's double click those to reset, because that's not what we're going to do. Instead, we're going to come to this slider here, which can allow us to actually change the exposure of the midtones specifically. So I could come in and actually raise that a little bit, maybe bring the highlights down a touch. We don't want to flatten the image too much, but I think that makes just a very subtle difference to the image. Let's look at an overall before and after. So again, this is where we started. This is where we've got to, right? So we've really played around with the exposure, the color. I'm actually really happy with it overall. I think it's become a much better photo. You know, the subject is much more clearly defined. We've really drawn the viewer's eye to the robin, lightened and darkened different areas to really make an impact there. Perhaps there's more dodging and burning we could do, but I also want to keep it reasonably natural. I don't want to go too far with it. So I think this is probably the best end result that I would want to go for, where we keep it a reasonably natural image, but we've enhanced it an awful lot. But let me know, is there something you would have done differently for this edit? You've darkened anywhere else, lightened anywhere else, or would you have gone a bit less? Would you have pulled it back a little bit? It's always really interesting to know. It's such a subjective thing. So it's always really interesting to know. Of course, you can check out all the kit we use for these videos, for this photo as well. So taking on the Nikon Z8 down in the description of the video. There'll be links down there to go and check them out. Take you over to parkcameras.com where you can check out all of that stuff and more, of course. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well, because there's new content all the time. I will, of course, see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.